The basic idea for the helicopter goes back to a simple toy invented by the Chinese thousands of years ago. That toy is still popular with children today. From this humble beginning, the helicopter has gradually evolved to its modern form. It is one of the most useful inventions ever conceived, and its future is extremely bright. Many early inventors shared the dream of an aircraft that could take off and land vertically and hover motionless in the air, as well as fly rapidly through it. Not all of these inventors recognized the virtues of the Chinese flying toy, which is a rotor composed of two or more lifting blades whirling about a vertical axis. Many other basic concepts were tried, and despite much optimism combined with hard work, none of them functioned as planned. Only when rotors were used in a variety of forms was success gradually achieved. The path was long, and many persistent individuals contributed to progress. The first machine to lift its own weight plus a pilot off the ground vertically was built by a Frenchman, Louis Breguet, in 1907, less than 4 years after the first successful powered airplane flight by the Wright brothers. Another Frenchman, Paul Cornu, achieved a similar result later that same year. Although achieving lift, neither machine had adequate control or stability to fly freely. Many inventors, particularly in Europe and the United States, built machines that attempted to solve the numerous problems that were encountered. Many design variations were tried, most with very limited success. It is inherently more difficult to generate lift and to provide control for a hovering aircraft than for an airplane which flies with a significant velocity through the air. The scientific knowledge needed for helicopters was not initially available. The primitive state of travel and communication technologies limited the sharing of knowledge between inventors, even when they were willing to exchange ideas and the results they had gained through experimentation. Also at that time, there was no organization dedicated to the advancement of helicopter technology, a role that the American Helicopter Society has filled since 1944. Little by little, progress was made. Invention of the slow-flying autogyro by Juan de la Sierra in Spain in the early 1920s was very significant in the development of the rotor system and control techniques, even though his aircraft could not hover. Finally, in the 1930s, significant accomplishments occurred at a more rapid pace. Louis Breguet tried again with the assistance of René Durand and produced a successful coaxial machine in France. Heinrich Fokker in Germany succeeded with a side-by-side helicopter, which was stable enough to be demonstrated inside a Berlin sports arena. Anton Flettner, also in Germany, built a closely intermeshing twin-rotor aircraft, which we now call a syncropter. This became the world's first production helicopter, which saw limited service in the Second World War. In the United States, Igor Sikorsky turned away from a successful career building fixed-wing airplanes to accomplish his long-standing dream, developing a truly successful helicopter. He first flew his VS-300 in 1939, then spent the next 2 years experimenting with a variety of control systems, including variations in the tail configuration. Whereas earlier inventors had most often used 2 or more lifting rotors, Sikorsky succeeded in providing excellent control capabilities about all axes, with a single main rotor plus a small tail rotor for anti-torque and directional control. This arrangement has become the standard for most of the world's helicopters ever since. Sikorsky produced the first production helicopter in the United States in 1942 for what was then the Army Air Corps. Other American inventors were active in the 1940s. Arthur Young developed the helicopters which formed the basis of the Bell Helicopter Organization. Frank Piasecki built a single rotor helicopter, but then switched to developing the tandem. His company eventually became Boeing Helicopters. Charles Kaman, who refined the syncropter concept. Other pioneers in this time frame include Stanley Hiller, Fred Doublehoff, and numerous others in the United States and in Europe. New models were introduced frequently in the 1940s and 50s, and new uses for these machines were constantly discovered. Early helicopters were powered by conventional reciprocating aircraft engines. In the 1950s, turbine engines first entered service. With much greater power for their weight and greater reliability, they became the dominant power source for medium and large helicopters throughout the world. Reciprocating engines are still used for the smaller varieties. The ability to land at low speed without power is one of the great safety advantages of the helicopter. Engine failure is not a serious problem because the rotor can continue spinning to provide lift, and the aircraft can glide down to the ground and land safely, even if all engine power is lost. All helicopters must demonstrate this capability before government airworthiness certification is issued. Okay, so helicopters can fly. What are they good for? Well, for one thing, helicopters save lives. Well over 1 million lives to date.
On November 29, 1945, 2 barge crewmen are rescued by an XR-5 from a stricken lighter run aground in rain and heavy winds in the first civilian rescue flight.
Since that first civilian rescue by helicopter, rescues from ships in distress have been repeated many times over the years all over the world. Most of these rescues have been under circumstances where the helicopter was the only conceivable way to safety. Floods threaten lives too, particularly when hurricanes bring extreme high tides and heavy rains, combining to cause dangerously high water along with strong winds. The use of helicopters to rescue flood victims has become legendary.
Task Force 9, Task Force 10, Engine 3, Squad 4, Battalion 1, respond to the structure fire, the intersection of Wilshire and Hope. That's Hope and Wilshire.
Fire looks like the 11th floor, fully involved. We have people on the roof that are in need of rescue. We want our first helicopter to assess that situation and get those people off the roof.
Helicopters provide the only possible means of escape. Some communities are now specifying that high-rise buildings must have helicopter landing pads on the roof to facilitate rescue in case of such a fire. Good idea. Accident victims. Critically ill patients that need to be transported to hospitals with special facilities. Emergency medical service helicopters are saving them every day. Some of these aircraft even have special onboard equipment for treatment en route. The time saved by these air ambulances is often the difference between life and death for the patient. The military has used their helicopters for many years to evacuate seriously wounded soldiers from the scene of battle to rear echelon hospitals. Starting primarily with the Korean War in the early 1950s, the rapid evacuation of the wounded has saved countless lives. Thanks to the helicopter, combined with modern medicine, more than 99% of U.S. troops wounded in Vietnam survived. Military forces use helicopters in many other ways. Without any requirement for runways, helicopters transport troops to where they are needed in the shortest possible time. They carry fuel, ammunition, artillery, and supplies of all kinds to support the ground forces. The helicopter is also ideal for an observation role, obtaining up-to-the-minute intelligence about enemy operations. In addition to the medical evacuation of the wounded, the helicopter is also the means by which airmen downed in enemy territory may be rescued. Even when trapped hundreds of miles behind enemy lines, many servicemen have been extricated successfully by helicopter. The tank and other armored vehicles were the principal weapons of armies in the Second World War. The tank reigned supreme because its mobility made it hard to destroy, while its firepower made it formidable. No longer. The helicopter, with far greater speed and maneuverability, has proven to be the primary counter to the tank. With guns, rockets, and missiles, it provides a lethal punch, rendering the tank an obsolescent weapon at best. Armies the world over are recognizing the helicopter as the modern assault weapon against many types of ground forces. Navies are also exploiting the helicopter's unique capabilities. It is an essential vehicle for protection of the fleet. Operating from small ships in all kinds of weather, the helicopter has proven to be a most versatile hunter and killer of enemy submarines. Its ability to hover for long periods allows it to lower powerful sonar equipment to great depths in the sea, listen for submarines, then move on to another dipping point in the search pattern. When the enemy is located, it can then launch a homing torpedo to destroy it. Helicopters are also used for rescues at sea and for ship resupply. In areas that might have been mined by an enemy, with serious danger to surface vessels, a powerful helicopter tows a heavy array of mine-sweeping gear to clear a path for ships to follow. Flying well ahead of and above the sweeping array, exploding mines do not affect it. These helicopters were used extensively for minesweeping during the recent war in the Persian Gulf. The Marines use helicopters for ship-to-shore assault operations. The first wave of troops ashore arrive by helicopter at high speed, while the surface vessels are still out at sea, far beyond the horizon. In addition to troops, all kinds of equipment are carried, even bridges to span inland streams. For a myriad of military uses, the helicopter is well recognized as a vital asset. There are even more uses for the helicopter in civilian roles. Saving lives has already been mentioned, but there are other familiar applications. Everyone who commutes by automobile into a big city is fully aware of the traffic helicopter, which reports on road congestion problems over the radio. The up-to-the-minute information on delays and recommendations on alternate routes help to minimize the lost time and frustration that often comes with traffic jams. Police frequently use helicopters to aid in the apprehension of criminals. Whether on foot or on wheels, they cannot avoid being tracked from the air. The helicopter is proving to be a powerful force in tracking and capturing drug smugglers, flying into the country with small airplanes. With speed and maneuverability, the right helicopter is effective in intercepting these illegal shipments and apprehending the smugglers on the spot. Not all civilian uses of helicopters are familiar to everyone. In addition to rescuing people from fires, helicopters are also used to fight fires. They can spread fire-suppressant chemicals or dump water scooped from any nearby pond directly on the blaze. Its precise controllability, plus the downwash from the rotor, makes the helicopter particularly effective in this role. When the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl suffered its breakdown with release of radioactive material, helicopters were called in to drop cement to seal off critical areas. Other helicopters sprayed large quantities of liquid suppressant to stabilize contaminated soil in order to minimize any additional scattering of radioactive dust. With offshore oil drilling platforms located hundreds of miles from land, the helicopter is a vital link to the mainland. In North Sea operations, where high winds and heavy seas prevail, the helicopter is frequently the only means of transporting personnel and equipment for continued operation of the rig. In any case, the helicopter is more economical than the much slower transport of workers by ship. One of the earliest uses of the helicopter was in lifting heavy loads in otherwise inaccessible locations. Erecting transmission towers in any area, especially remote ones, can be a difficult and expensive task. The helicopter can make short work of these operations and has been widely used around the world. It can fly components to the site, discharge the materials and workers to make large assemblies on the ground, then lift the assembly with precision to allow the permanent connections to be made. The workers can even use the aircraft as a convenient elevator between the ground and the high spots at which they sometimes have to work. The helicopter can also be used to string the cable from one pole to the next, paying out the cable as it flies. Sometimes helicopters are called upon to lift unique loads. An entire prefabricated house has been airlifted by a flying crane helicopter. Another crane was used to remove the 15,000-pound Statue of Freedom from the top of the U.S. Capitol building in 1993 because of needed repairs. After refurbishment of the statue, it was replaced during a second flight. The helicopter accomplished each task in only a few minutes at a small fraction of the cost compared to any other possible method. The lifting ability of helicopters is also exploited in logging operations. Workers on the ground fell the chosen trees, trim off the branches, cut the logs to the desired lengths, and attach the harness for lifting. The helicopter picks the logs straight up through the adjacent trees and quickly transports them to a convenient collection site a few miles away. No access road to the timber is required, and the clear cutting often used to facilitate ground transport is avoided. Thus, the helicopter provides an environmentally friendly method of selective logging, as well as permitting operations in otherwise inaccessible areas. The ability of the helicopter to hover and operate in remote areas allows still more uses. A ship deep in the Arctic Ocean is resupplying remote Eskimo villages. Bypassing the ice-clogged harbors, the helicopter makes short work of bringing the vital supplies the villages need to survive the long winter. Helicopters are also ideal vehicles for patrolling power lines or pipelines. If a problem is spotted, it can hover or land for a closer inspection or repairs. A good application for helicopters, recognized long ago, is in agriculture, for crop dusting and fertilization. The excellent controllability and the unique downwash patterns induced by the rotor provide precise control of the operation with a minimum of overspray. Unlike an airplane, which dare not be slowed to its stalling speed, the helicopter can slow to a stop at the end of a track and quickly change direction for the next pass. Whenever you see a news broadcast or a movie scene showing a bird's-eye view of the ground, it is nearly always a helicopter that has provided the cameraman his perch. Because the helicopter provides the best views, it has become an extremely popular vehicle for sightseers. Scenic spots the world over have sightseeing helicopter service available to the public. More and more businesses are recognizing the value of helicopters for executive transport. Taking off from their place of business and flying straight to where they need to go, unimpeded by the ever-increasing traffic congestion on the ground, business people save time and money using helicopters. Worldwide, over 1,000 helicopters are used in this way. Every United States president, starting with Dwight Eisenhower, has been transported by helicopter from the White House lawn to other locations such as Andrews Air Force Base or Camp David. Several generations of helicopters have provided the fastest and safest mode of short-distance travel for 9 American presidents to date. When the president travels far from Washington, his helicopters often travel along in large military cargo planes to be available to him at his destination. One use that has not yet been fully exploited is that of scheduled airline passenger transport. There are a few operations, such as this helicopter airline connecting Vancouver and Victoria in Western Canada. Because the two cities are separated by water, no connecting roads exist. For point-to-point travel, the helicopter provides the fastest and most efficient service. There are many other city pairs in the world where helicopter airlines would be effective, but relatively few heliports with adequate facilities have been built. Runways are not needed, but effective operations require a certain amount of area convenient to population centers, with adequate connections to other forms of transportation. Obtaining city ordinance approval for constructing the required heliports has been the major difficulty. But as time goes on, increasing ground congestion and the consequent growing need for convenient short-haul air service will almost certainly result in more and more scheduled helicopter airline operation. Anticipating this need, helicopter manufacturers are developing aircraft specifically tailored for airline-type operation. It is expected that after the turn of the century, these aircraft will be a common sight near population centers. Another potential, not yet realized, is that of widespread use for personal transportation. Igor Sikorsky and many others dreamed of a personal aircraft as handy as a private automobile and demonstrated this possible use with their first successful helicopters. After half a century, there still are very few personal helicopters in use, but this might be in the process of changing. Only in the past few years have there been small helicopters available at reasonable prices that the average person might hope to afford. More and more choices are becoming available, with single-place, two-place, three-place, and four-place models already on the market. The day might yet come when many families will park a helicopter next to the automobile in their garage. After all, the helicopter is the only aerial vehicle that, like the automobile, can take you from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. Is the future really so bright? After all, the helicopter has sometimes been described as an expensive, unreliable, slow, noisy, vibrating machine that is difficult to fly. It is true that some of the early machines were plagued with problems that made them less than ideal. But technology has come a very long way from the early days, and the old problems have nearly all been solved. Today's helicopters are far more sophisticated than they were in the early days, with many new features available. Some of the new features are evident, such as the use of a shrouded tail fan that reduces noise and increases safety, or the use of a fan hidden inside the tail cone, so that the conventional tail rotor is eliminated. Other visible changes include advanced blade tip shapes and airfoils that result in lower noise and improved performance. Many new features, however, cannot be seen by a casual observer. For example, structural materials are much better today than they were in the past. Advanced metal alloys and composite structures are now widely used. With many thousands of individual fibers of glass, graphite, or other materials, composites are highly resistant to fatigue damage from vibratory loads, and stronger and lighter than conventional materials as well. Many advanced helicopters use all composite rotor blades and hub components with unlimited service lifetimes. Several successful systems for reducing vibration have been developed, including an active control system that senses accelerations at various points in the airframe and instantaneously generates cancellation forces within the structure to counteract the vibratory motion. Ride comfort with these systems is exceptionally good, comparable to a modern jet transport airplane. While most helicopters are not inherently easy to fly, many systems exist to make it simpler. Mechanical systems, such as stabilizer bars, have been used for many years, and digital electronic stabilization and control systems are available that will fly the aircraft hands-off to any desired location. Navigation is becoming easier all the time. The satellite-based Global Positioning System, or GPS, will allow pinpoint navigation accuracy anywhere in the world with low-cost onboard receivers. The dream of simply punching in your desired destination and then sitting back in comfort while your helicopter automatically flies you there and lands is already feasible today, and it will surely be common sometime in the future. What about the helicopter's reputation for being much slower than an airplane? Although there are limits, helicopters can fly much faster than some people think. The current official world record holder for pure helicopters is this aircraft, which was clocked at just over 400 kilometers per hour, or 249 miles per hour. More conventional helicopter cruising speeds are not usually above 150 miles per hour, but that is certainly twice as fast as the automobile, and the helicopter can go straight to its destination, while the automobile is constrained to follow a road which seldom is direct and often is congested. By adding auxiliary propulsion and a wing, a compound vehicle is created. Speeds of experimental compound helicopters have exceeded 300 miles per hour. Even higher speeds have been obtained by tilt-rotor aircraft. With two rotors for lift in hover, it behaves much like a helicopter at low speed. For high-speed flight, the pilot tilts the two rotors forward through a 90-degree angle, and the vehicle becomes an airplane with oversized propellers. This NASA experimental aircraft has flown at roughly 350 miles per hour, and higher speeds with this concept are possible. The tilt-rotor aircraft has the advantage of very efficient cruise and should outperform conventional helicopters on longer-range missions. Production prototypes of a military version of the tilt-rotor are in the flight development stage for U.S. Marine assault missions. Tilt-rotors designed expressly for commercial service could someday be used in intercity travel, supplementing the pure helicopters used for the shorter routes. Still more advanced aircraft are in the design stage. For example, an advanced tilt-rotor with a variable diameter rotor system has been successfully tested in the wind tunnel. With a large diameter in hover and smaller diameter in cruise, it is more efficient at both ends of the flight spectrum. Helicopters have come far since their inception and have reached a point where their future is assured. Military and civilian operators both find the helicopter indispensable. There is no doubt that applications will continue to increase with time. The technology is here, and helicopters are productive, reliable, comfortable, and safe. The helicopter is indeed a most useful invention.